Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews, Film and Television. I'm Jonathan Manzer, here with Stephen Mosi.
How you doing?
Scott Thurlow.
Hey there.
And we are...
The Three Amigos.
The Three Amigos.
The Three Amigos.
Yes.
And as competent as they are as well.
Clearly.
So, Stephen, would you like to begin with the funny log line?
Yeah, so this is... oh man, now I'm embarrassed to say it. This is un-three-given.
Yeah.
See, it's beautiful because this movie is so filled with terrible puns that...
No matter what we say, it's on par.
So, Stephen, would you like to continue with the plot of this work?
Absolutely. So in the beginning, there is the threat of El Guapo, a bandit, and he is going to come into this town, take over the town. The woman whose name is completely
Carmen.
As Carmen decides that she has to go find some heroes to save her town.
We need a hero.
She sees a movie of these three actors who go by the name of the Three Amigos, played by Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and Martin Short. And so she sends a telegram to them. They misinterpret it, decide that they're coming to Mexico to do a show to make some money, get there, realize that they are actually having to fight this giant band of bandits.
They're in a Western duel. A siege.
Run away, then decide to man up, I guess, come back and fight the bandits and defeat them. And that's pretty much the entire plot of this movie.
And gags and jokes happen.
Oh, there's lots of jokes and gags.
It's unfair because I think I can't help but look at Tropic Thunder, which is a fantastic film that did the exact same kind of premise.
Sure.
But far better than this. But this is it's half puns, half trying to be Mel Brooks. It's a competent plot in the sense of that it has character development, it has acts, but it's nothing particularly special. It's just a vehicle for the humor.
Yeah. That's the thing. Exactly, right? It's just a framework so they can have this setup and do this ridiculous shit in this entire thing. So to me, I was going to this giving it a 1 because it's just, as you said, an excuse really to set up some flimsy stuff. And then, there is some character development for sure, later on. But really, again, it's just there to exist as the base in order to have all these little comical, whimsical things happen throughout. It's a comedy of errors, really, pretty much, as well. The whole plot kicks off because of miscommunication, misinterpretation, and then they become local heroes, I suppose. But I'm just saying, I'm looking at, there's nothing wrong with it, but because of that very fact, I'm looking at a 1.
Yeah, it's not an incredibly complex plot. I will agree with you there. However, I think I'm looking at more of a 2 for this. I think
convinced
that I like the plot well enough, and while yes, it is a vehicle for making a lot of jokes, some, very punny and I feel like there are a lot of different people's comedy that went into this. There's a point where
it's a mismatch. Yeah.
There's one point in the movie where it gets super surreal. They meet a singing bush and kill an invisible samurai
swordsman.
And
it's fucking Monty Python.
Yeah, well, exactly, almost, or an even somewhat somehow more surreal Mel Brooks gag, but that nothing like that ever happens anywhere else in the movie.
Before or after.
So it's
true.
Like, it seems kind of out of place, but it's funny and it kind of works.
Well,
But I guess that goes more towards. I'm veering off of where I was. But however, I think that there is the issue with all these, like, with this bandit gang. They're coming in and
being bandits.
There is definitely the moment where the heroes, the Three Amigos, decide that, or fully understand what's going on, decide that they want to run away, and then they come back. Like, I think there's a lot. I think there's a good amount to this plot that's like kind of gets lost in all the jokes.
Well, to build off of what you said, you have three selfish characters who go off to, in a sense,
They're just bumbling idiots.
Yeah, but like they're established. Yes, they're bumbling and incompetent. That's a lot of the humor. But the idea is that they're all. But actually, later on, they do prove that they can back up certain skills of theirs.
That's true.
What happens is, though, they're selfish. They're not thinking beyond their own kind of desires. They come to the thing you said. They see the repercussions of what this will actually cost to be heroes, and not just play them on television. And then they see also right afterwards the repercussions of their cowardice.
Yeah.
And they start their transition to being heroes, which they do the castle breach. They rescue the damsel in distress.
Infiltration assault mission.
They had the bad guy come back. They rallied the townsfolk to stand up to. It's a very classic story. You could have had this in medieval times. You could have had this in any kind of situation. Like, this is a classic story. Again, not overly complex, but I think has all at least the competent elements to it. I'm going to give it a 2.
You're saying it's the Amigo with 1,000 faces, which is like probably like
somewhat
largely true. And like I said, I could be convinced, and I think you guys did. I will. I'll decide on a 2. My final score for the plot. Yeah, there's enough there, and you guys are right about it, so I agree.
All right, Scott, start talking about themes.
So maybe again, I was coming into this looking at a 0, but perhaps given what we just said about plot, that like it could be said that you will discover the inner hero. Everybody has to fight their own personal El Guapo, I guess, as Steve Martin like gives a speech.
And
about.
In this case, it's an actual.
This case,
it's actually
yours
El
is
Guapo.
literally El Guapo. Sure, but like I don't know, man. Like maybe you could extract something from that, where like you play a hero on TV, but one confronted with actually being one in a certain situation, or like having to become one. Maybe there's something there, but again, like it's difficult, at least in this film specifically, because it's, as we said, largely a vehicle to have like a bunch of different forms of comedy and just gags and jokes. But there is certainly an underlying plot, as we just said as well. So I don't know, you guys tell me. I'm looking at a soft 0, but I could be convinced easily of a 1 if you can point to something significant about it.
So it is about everyone has an El Guapo.
Okay.
What I particularly like about the way they handled it was, yes, the Three Amigos had their heroic moment, but in actually defeating El Guapo, it was in a sense to don't rely on heroes, because they're not the people you think they are.
Yeah, okay.
It's about you have to, the townsfolk standing up,
band together,
and stopped El Guapo. Yes, the illusion of the hero was a driving force, but that's all it was. It was that illusion. They weren't the people you see on screen. I always liked the kill your heroes mentality in a film, and I think it did it pretty well by, like, especially for the era it's taking place, where movies are a new thing. People are looking at the film like, these are heroes. We still have them today.
True.
No, they're not. They're normal people who have all the failings, and to fight your own El Guapo, you have to actually do it yourself. So I'm going to give it a soft 1, but I think it was a fairly good point.
All right. What do you think, Zivo?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's a movie about coming to terms with your strengths and your weaknesses to an extent.
All right.
Like,
all right. Yeah.
when they realize that they are not in a, like, that they're not play acting a fight, all their weaknesses come like to the forefront, and they need to kind of get over that and get past it. And yeah, you're right. Like the entire town coming together and like fighting their El Guapo, who is actually El Guapo, is a really interesting moment in the movie where it kind of turns on them using the thing that they're good at, the town using the thing they're good at, which is sewing.
Hidden skill, whatever. Yeah.
To defeat, this gang of bandits, and like, there's enough there. I think it's not super strong, but there's enough there.
Also, it was very. I just was thinking while you were talking about this. The German tries to kill Ned, who's Martin Short's character, because he wants to literally kill his hero.
That's true.
And ends up, because he doesn't believe, he thinks it's all an illusion, and he ends up dying because of his
Ned does actually have some skills,
so it's kind of a backpedaling on their theme, but I think again to the point that these are real people who sometimes can be heroic and sometimes not,
when they have necessary skills. Sure. All right, yeah, you guys convinced me. I guess I'm going to come down with the soft 1, but still 1. There's enough there, and you can get that out of it, and it was solid enough. So
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue on with El Guapo, the antagonist. I think he's the real strength of this film. He's such a neat character, and I think the jokes, him as like kind of the straight man
involving him,
a band of bumbling sidekicks. He gets bested because he underestimates the Three Amigos. He underestimates the will of the people to rise up against him, and I think he. Very complex character. He seems like a legitimate threat, if a little cocky in his own
hubris, if you will.
Yeah,
sure.
So I think he's a very good villain.
No, I like this portrayal, and of course, I set him up as like the standard, like somewhat mustache twirling, like bandit king leader, if you will, bandit prince, but yeah, like there was a bit more depth to him for sure, and his motivations were like clear enough, I suppose. Like it wasn't like questioning like why he was doing what he was doing, and yeah, the actor did a fine portrayal, and you're right, he does a good job of playing like the straight man villain in like a farcical, like non-heroic trio. So yeah, it's solid enough. In his band, I sort of counts. Maybe some of them are secondary or supporting. Yeah, like El Jefe, for example, exactly. But just in general, yeah, I think he's a solid 1 for me.
I think you actually get to know more about him than you do most villains.
Some villains.
That would.
He's turning 40 and so forth.
Case. Yeah, you get to learn a little bit about like his personal demons, I guess, and like what is bothering him, and like it's used as jokes, but you still understand more about the character because of it. And
sure.
I don't know. I thought he was pretty strong. I'm gonna give him 1.
I'm gonna give him 1, if for nothing else, the plethora of gifts bit that he runs.
Plethora of pinatas, man. Classic.
Plethora of pinatas, yeah.
So, all right, that's 1 for everyone.
Yep.
Steven, on to the protagonists.
All right. The Amigos. They all
Lucky Day, Dusty Bottom.
Yeah, Lucky Day, Dusty Bottom, and Ned Nederlander, I believe.
Yep.
They all have their interesting quirks. One of the funniest part, and I almost brought this up under themes when you were mentioning that they are all selfish, was the scene where they're all in bed talking about what they're going to do with the money. And Steve Martin says he's going to buy a car, or Lucky Day says he's going to buy a car. Dusty Bottom says he's going to go to like
visit
New York and like have a lot of champagne and stuff. And then Ned says, I'm going to build a shelter for homeless children. And they're like, oh yeah, obviously I was going to do that too. like
it was a given.
Again, a gag, but like builds in like kind of this like how their character, like what their characters think about and like what their characters are kind of at their depth. And like it seems like Ned is the one that, played by Martin Short, is the one that is trying to make the world a better place, whereas the other two are kind of selfish but can at least be shamed into into being
that's true. And to build on that, you're right, like when they decide like to figure out like this is actually happening, not in some kind of weird elaborate stage play, Ned is also the one who decides to become an actual Three Amigo and says, I'm drawing the line in the sand, are we mice or men? And sort of like shames them into joining him to actually fight back.
Ned is the obvious moral center.
Yeah. He's the heart, for sure.
you have Steve Martin, who is
The bravado,
brains.
basically.
Sort of.
yes, in both senses. I think he's mixing bravado for brains, but he's the second one to join because I don't think he wants to be upstaged by
Right.
Ned there.
Sure, he's like their de facto like leader, at least in terms of like their troupe
Except
of
that
acting.
Ned is really the de facto leader there.
Right, then it switches. What I'm saying, like
And then Chevy Chase is, I guess you would have him as the brawn,
the muscle,
You
yeah, sort of.
but he goes along just because everyone else is going along.
Yeah.
I don't think he himself would have become a Three Amigo in real life if it was just up to him. But anyway, I don't know. They're good. They're not. It's not great.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's three of the best like comedic actors of that era from '86.
Yeah, I like the comedy that goes on between them. I think they have pretty good chemistry between the three of them.
Yeah.
Throughout the movie, and like they have a combined arc that works for me.
Yeah, I'll back that up. I'll agree. Like, I think collectively, you can each assign them 1/3 of credit, and then because they're the Three Amigos, then they do have development. You do get some sort of nuance about their personalities and so forth throughout, and then they band together and decide to rescue the town, save the town. So yeah, I think it deserves like a decent one, soft one maybe overall, but still
Are they
one.
all 33.3%?
Yeah,
adding up to
repeating, of course.
adding up to infinitesimally
I'm
close
gonna
to
say
one,
that I think Ned has
but never reaching it.
the most development.
Yeah,
in this.
I mean, I agree with that, but they still have all of them have it enough.
Yeah, he was. If not for Martin Short, I would give this a 0. But I think that he ties the Three Amigos together.
Really ties the Amigos together, dude. Yeah.
All right.
I'll agree.
All right, Scott, supporting.
Yeah, okay, so I guess we can count Carmen maybe, and her son, I suppose, Rodrigo, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the town, like a couple of the townspeople, and like you said, Jefe, who is El Guapo's like second in command, like henchman guy. So like it's all fine; they're all there. I know Steve will sort of had an issue with the stereotypical portrayal of a Mexican gang and so forth. And I guess you can count the German, like the arms dealer who comes in to
Yeah.
give him the guns, who shows up early for like a cantina scene. Like they're all fine, but of course they're all just like one-note characters more or less, because that's what their point is in a comedy film. So I'm going to defaultly give them a 0 just because that's not the point of these characters, really. They're just there to serve gags and setups and so forth. They're not there to be characters. Like, they're almost literally stage dressing as well. So that's how I stand, but I could be convinced, but I'll toss it to you guys.
I think I'm going to end up giving this a 0 just because I agree with that. I think most of the characters, other than Carmen, are just comic relief. Like,
Yeah.
I like them,
Or they're cardboard cutouts, even if not. They're either villainous relief or comic relief.
but they are not the focus of like character development or character design in this movie. Or not necessarily design, but like character, whatever the
Character
word.
focus is fine.
A certain character, je ne sais quoi. But like, I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say. But
Clearly.
no, they are kind of there. They're important to the plot because
To an
you
extent.
can't just have 4 people in this
Right.
movie.
I mean,
But I don't. No one. Even Carmen doesn't really like stand out head and shoulders above anybody. Above it, like a baseline supporting character, I guess.
yeah.
What do you think?
I'm pretty much where I stand.
I like Carmen. I think that at moments she shows a agency and intelligence to her, but it's not enough to counter the gagness of all the other
nature of them,
characters.
Yeah.
So I'll probably join you with a
Yeah, I
0.
think that's a correct assessment. Just because, again, the nature of the film, no fault of like the acting or writing even per se. In fact, the writing took that into account. That's why they're sort of just there as props, more or less.
Right.
So I'm on to dialogue, which I'm probably going to depart from you guys for the rest of this.
Yeah.
There's a couple of good lines in this. We all have to fight our El Guapo. Yours happens to really El Guapo. Like there's a couple. The comedy didn't work for me. So yeah, there's could be the best comedians of that era. Not the best.
I get you. Your mileage might vary.
So I'm going to give it a 0.
All right. I'm hoping Steve-O can convince me because I'm literally on the fence about this one because I'm somewhat on your side, but not to the degree that you said, E. It's almost like approaching a 45-55 split, if you will, mathematically, that some of the jokes are fine and they worked for me. Some of them didn't. Some of them, I will say this, maybe this is more style, but it sort of bleeds over into dialogue as well. Or there were some jokes that I thought they were going to drag on too much, and it, thankfully, to me, quickly cut to something else, like to the next scene. However, though, there were other jokes and other instances in which they did drag on, at least, again, to me. So, yeah, like, again, like, aside from the Guapo line and a couple other, like, more famous things, and should we count, like, the salute itself that we did? Like,
as style.
As style, okay. So, yeah, like, I'm really wavering on it. I could be convinced kind of either way. It's going to be a soft 1 or a soft 0, like, regardless. So, I'm going to see if Steve-O has any convincing arguments either way.
I like the dialogue in this. I think I'm probably going to end up giving it a 1. Like you said, your own personal Guapo thing, plethora of pinatas scene.
It's all just puns, though, like, which I know you like.
That's a whole... That plethora of pinata scene is a whole, like...
I said, this is not a
interesting
terrible...
dialogue scene. And so, the speech that Ned gives when he's convincing everybody to go back, and, like, this blends dialogue and style, but as he's, like, loading the gun, I thought that was, like, a perfect fucking scene of, like, rallying the troops. There are a few other scenes that I really enjoyed too, and like it's not like the greatest dialogue ever, but I did like the jokes probably more than you did, and I think that they're just like I love a dumb pun, and there are plenty of them in this movie, and I mean I enjoyed the dialogue, so I'm gonna give it a 1.
I'm still not convinced. I think I'm gonna go with my default like gut feeling that it's a soft 0, but just not enough there for me. Although some of it was fine, and I chuckled and had a laugh or two, but just not as much as I'd like it to be.
I mean, I was like low grade laughing basically throughout this entire movie.
Yes.
Like I was just like a little mild, like,
and I was leaving the room out of awkwardness.
Yes.
So I mean, again, I'm not trying to convince you because we all have our own tastes in comedy.
And
this wasn't.
That's the other thing. Like this movie utilizes awkwardness a lot, and I know you don't really like that type of humor, and I do.
I don't have a problem with it, but it's not my favorite either. So it's sort of like their middle of the road. But I'm gonna just not give it as much credit here because I don't think it just doesn't do it as much for me. So,
Steven, on to you with style.
Style. So this movie really, I've been kind of waiting to talk about this because I could have said it a few other times, but I held off for style. This movie really like lampoons like really old westerns to the degree that it does. I really love like there are certain shots that like are backdrops that stick out in my mind, like all the fake backdrops that they use like in certain scenes. Just like were really funny to me. And there's one scene where they come out on the desert when they're going to confront El Guapo, and it's this really cool, like very, very Western scene. Very, very, very Western scene.
Sorry, I yawned.
where it's like the wavy.
Go on.
It was an intense yawn. Yeah. It's a very like it's like the wavy like
weekend,
heat coming off of the ground scene, like they slowly dissolve in. Like I thought that was really well shot. There's a lot of other stuff like that where it's like they are doing a Western and they're using some like new style because this movie came out in the early so like the mid 80s, and so they're using like the style of the time in parts of it. But they're also like going back, way back, and like digging into like, old school Hollywood,
that stuff,
homaging it because it's a movie that was
it's set in 1916, which is when the cusp of like silent to talkies, if you will.
Right. Sure. And they use a lot of that in this, and like there's a lot of style in there. I actually would like to like look more into this movie and like dig more into kind of all of the references because I'm sure there are a lot that I just didn't get or like see. But I really like the style of this movie, is what I'm coming down to. I thought it was good.
I feel you. I'm going to go with the Three Amigos costumes, 1. pretty much. Like,
Yeah, also,
you know what I mean? Like, but I do agree. Like, in more seriousness, I do agree to a lot of that it was competently shot, and you're right. Like, some of the actual like homage and references and visual like elements to it were quite well done. That is, and like it just overall it held together really well. Like I said, I appreciate it when it would quickly cut away from a joke that was had run its course and then go on to the next scene. So yeah, I can't really fault the style really in any sense. But and of course, like I said, the costumes are sort of iconic, if you will, at least in comedy.
Mhm.
Like if you see anything like that, you'll it's a reference to it. So yeah, it was a solid one for me, at least overall on the style front for the most part.
So there's two genres here. One is the spoof. To spoof, you have to do the actual genre you're spoofing
Right.
well. And I thought, again, it was a competent kind of action-y film, especially towards the latter half.
Mhm.
Now, the sight gags in this were a mixed bag for me.
I agree with that for the most part.
However, there are a couple good ones. The when they're sitting out on the prairie, and the animals keep showing up.
Like coyote shows up.
I mean,
It's
that's
stupid.
That's one of the most famous classic scenes from this movie, but yeah, it's good though.
When Steve Martin is attached to the chains and trying to get out of it. There's enough in there to work for me. I also have to say the music was pretty decent.
It's solid, you're right.
Had a very Western feel. Actually, also a very North by Northwest feel, I believe.
Well, I'm not sure, but so real quickly, as a quick story, that came up and you said, is that the music from North by Northwest? And I was like, maybe, I don't remember, but it's possible. So if it is, cool. If not, it still sounded good. So
I was actually waiting to see if any of you mentioned the music because I really like the music, and I
Randy
wanted
Newman,
to.
man. Randy Newman.
Yeah, well, Randy
Yeah, that's
Newman,
true.
man, Randy Newman both wrote the music for this movie
and the script as
co-wrote
well,
the script
apparently.
with Steve Martin and Lorne Michaels.
Yep,
right?
yep,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So interesting.
It's a solid mix.
Yeah. The music was great. I really like the style overall.
I agree.
I'm going to give it a pretty strong.
It matched well to everything else, and so yeah, for all that, I'm going to give it a pretty solid 1.
You give it a 1 as well.
All right.
Okay, and Scott for recommendation.
I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it's sort of like a classic 80s comedy. Like, if you haven't seen it, I think it's worth one watch. Again, as we said, to an extent, your mileage may vary, for sure. But however, it's iconic-ish comedy movie from that era, made by and starring some of the bigger names within that sphere. So yeah, I do recommend it at the end of the day. Like, it's been probably, I don't know, fucking like 20 years, maybe more than that, since I've seen it all, Three Amigos in full. And it still like holds up well enough. It's not basically like, if you're 15, at least as I was, yeah, you're going to find it a lot funnier than you do nowadays. But of course, because we also analyze shit all the time, like, you know what I mean? I'm just analyzing every fucking joke. But more or less, I do still think at the end of the day, like I said, it's worth a watch. Three Amigos is held up well enough and is a pretty solid entry in the comedic era from the 80s. So check it out if you haven't, or give it a quick rewatch and enjoy it for what it is, and then move on.
Yeah, I will say, I have really fond memories of this movie from when I was a kid, watching it with my dad, and that is actually the perfect time to see this movie. I think if you're a dad who loves like terrible dad jokes, watch this movie with your child and just have a good time, like laughing, and like your kid will remember that fondly 20 years hence.
Sure.
So yeah, I recommend it.
I do not.
I figured you wouldn't.
It's okay, but My Blue Heaven, watch that.
Another good movie.
Steve Martin. Actually, the thing is, I can look at all these actors and think of a better
name better movie they've been in. Sure.
So, I mean, like, I could see the appeal of this. I don't hate people who hate this movie. Or I don't hate people who like this movie. I think it appeals to a certain set, just not to me.
Yeah, it's fair.
So
completely valid, man.
Any final thoughts?
No, I think, like I said, it stands where it stands, which is like decently. It's not like fucking Caddyshack, which, speaking of the name about a movie that Chevy Chase has been in, but it's still solidly there from the the era of the 80s comedies. So
yeah,
that's pretty much it.
I agree. I was trying to think of a Steve Martin movie that's better than this, but
My Blue Heaven.
Or not Steve Martin, Martin Short.
Inner Space.
Get the fuck out of here. Inner Space is not better than Three Amigos.
I don't know.
It's a good movie, don't get me wrong, but anyway. That's
What are
that's
the
it for
scores,
me.
though?
Okay, so I'll go down the line. Steven, 8. Scott, 7. Me, 6. As the curmudgeonly old Chevy Chase from Community.
Oh, man. It's Chevy Chase from real life, actually.
So it's 7 overall.
That's fucking fine. In fact, that's higher than I thought it would come out being. So
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Stephen Hermosi
Adios.
and Scott Thurlow.
and I'll be riding into a cardboard sunset right now. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?